How you doing? So hello everybody, welcome back to the Educatedcollins Snap channel. We're going to be doing our meta tier list, meta overview for the first week of the Elsa meta. It's definitely been an interesting meta. I would say Second Dinner has been releasing powerful season pass cards as like a profit strategy. It seems to be working for them. And we're going to be talking about the meta, some of the decks. I do think there's a lot of viable decks, so it's not too bad. Let's get started. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get in the beginnings. Right, we do have the October season. This is the Elsa Bloodstone season. It's come out. Do want to preface some things. Some comments people were suggesting in the last one was to put like standard list, high rate list in the actual list of the things, just so that if they want to like showcase like a slide, they can do that, and then they don't have to explain, oh, the first one is standard, they can just explain. So I've done that. Also don't have like third deck lists. I took that out, so we just always have notes about the deck archetype essentially. So just for it to be more streamlined. It's more work honestly to put notes, I would say, because you have to like have a good grasp of every single archetype, which I wouldn't say I do personally, but that's the decision. We'll see how it works, and we'll see how it is going forward. That's the changes we have there. And then sometimes I will have alternatives. I didn't really do it like ritualistically for every single deck, but sometimes people don't have Jeff, people don't have blah blah blah, right? And sometimes if there are like easy alternatives that make sense or still strong, I'll put it in there. So those are just some things that I wanted to mention, but yeah, just keep that in mind. So first off, right, it's going to be going in order of like, I guess it's more of like play rate and power together essentially, right? Like in terms of like what you're likely to see and how good they are. And I'll say first off, right, Elsa Bloodstone, the new season pass card, it is strong, right? So this is definitely something that I think Second Dinner wants to continue doing, where they release strong season pass cards to encourage people to spend, at least buy the season pass, and then tone it down or see if after the pass is over, if the meta needs for those season pass cards to be adjusted, right? Because they want people to have a reason to buy these season passes, and the easiest ways to make them powerful. So this is a trend they seem to be doing right recently. So it seems to be working for them, and not sure if they're going to change that in any particular way. I think the next season is also pretty good card. So just think that's something is working for them and they're incentivized to do. But yeah, Elsa's Bloodstone, really strong card, really has good synergies. We can see the Kitty Pryde was nerfed in preparation for this, and honestly still really strong. Like Kitty Pryde in itself may just be too good, right? Like maybe that's the issue, and just any synergies there just makes it look off. But yeah, definitely a super strong combination, as well as just like things like Mysterio, and so there's a lot of really good cards to play with Elsa. And even if you don't have that much synergy, just it by itself is so strong, because if you get like if you fill 2 lanes, that's it, right? This is a 2/8 if you fill 2 lanes, right? And you can do it with cards that get stronger if they have power, right? Like Iron Man would get stronger if you play it in that 4th slot, right? It's getting that extra 3. So there's definitely some real power to this card that you could argue is too strong, definitely. And it's one of the most popular archetypes because it's doing well, and it's a new card. People like playing with the new stuff. So yeah, definitely in there. Really strong. Make sure you're utilizing Elsa if you're playing an Elsa deck, right? You want to make sure you are filling your lanes, and turn 4, turn 5 are key usually in these decks, because these are where you fill your lanes. If you fill your lane turn 5, right, you give yourself an opportunity to get punished by like Shadow King and stuff like that. But if you're running a deck where you don't really think your opponent's running that type of counter or anything like that, that you could really just fill and then focus on the other lanes you need, or things like that. You unfortunately don't really run Alioth in these type of deck lists, so that's like the main, like one of the things that you might be missing. But overall, it's strong enough in itself that just a really good archetype. Hard to say it's bad, and if you want to run it, you want to play a new card, this is definitely option. And there's lots of options for Elsa, so you'll find something if you really want to play that archetype. Next up in there, I'm going to put Silky Smooth. So this is like my personal, I think like the most like well-rounded deck in the meta, where I just think like you have a lot of options and you can win a lot of matchups, and it just has like good favorability. You get to move things, you get to be unexpected in how you want to play things out, right? Spider-Man can do some things, Vision can do some things, and Kraven's just a really good stat bump into a lot of different options. So this one I would say just has a lot of good potential. It's been consistent, doing well. A lot of options in the mid game and how you want to play it out. So definitely a big fan of this deck, and just strong. You get to play Elsa if you want it, and you get to play Alioth if you want it. So I just think this is a really good archetype. Really has a lot of good options for it. So big fan of this one. Next up, we have Iron Patriot. I mean, Forge into Brood to Absorbing, man, just still broken in my opinion. Still super powerful. That combo, it's really hard to compete much at all if there's no like threats due to locations, threats due to your opponent's game plans. If you can just play Forge into Brood into Absorbing Man, you get to play anything else like Iron Man, Blue Marvel, whatever, right? It's like such a strong way to win. So definitely think this is a very powerful list. Is easy to pilot once you get the system down. So fun list, strong list, works really well. It's been consistent once you added Forge in. So yeah. Well, consistent is hard, right? Because sometimes you won't get it's consistent if you have the combo, right? Which is every deck. But if you don't have the combo, there's still stuff to do, right? Mr. Sinister gives you that secondary win condition. It's definitely not as strong, but it still has super powerful finishes if you have the right setup. Next up, we have a deck, Sauron, right? Shuri, I think, is just like, has some of the highest potential in a deck, in that if you can play Shuri into Red Skull, Shuri into Vision, you just have really big ceiling that's really hard to deal with. And there's definitely less Shang-Chi in the meta for sure. Like I definitely noticed, like compared to like 2 months ago or 2 metas ago, there's definitely way less Shang-Chi. So you can get away with like not playing the armor that you used to. The Cosmo isn't really being played in these decks anymore, so there isn't that much like, hey, you got to watch out for the Shang-Chi they used to, and you could just do whatever you want. And then Sauron is just a nice piece, mostly for Ebony Maw. Just gives you that like something to play into, like, hey, I go Sauron, Ebony Maw, turn 6, maybe after a Taskmaster, It's really good power to put on the final turn. So just has a lot of good things going for it. Really high ceiling, and sometimes hard to deal with if you don't have any ways to counter it, right? There's just some game states where it's like you always win because you're just going to be stronger than your opponent. Like if you play Vision into Taskmaster, it's just enough. Next up, we have Alioth Lockdown. So Alioth is a big bad. Like, you know, like in terms of like how it makes people feel, this is a big bad level card. But yeah, just being able to lock down a lane, win a lane, and then just say Alioth will win me the next one. Doesn't matter what you do, I win it. Like that's just so powerful, and a lot of people really like guaranteeing a win. They like making sure that, oh, if I get in this scenario, I always win because of X card, right? Like, so Alioth does let you do that. You can set up auto win situations, and that's just really powerful, really fun for players. So definitely a strong archetype, depending on how you want to, manage it. But fun for the people that like Alioth. Fun, and Alioth's being played in a lot of things, so it's not like this is the only Alioth deck. You can play Alioth in everything. Honestly, you can splash Alioth in almost every single deck in the game. It's not really true, but like that feeling is there, where you always have to be thinking about, oh, they're winning 2 lanes. Should I be worried about Alioth? So yeah, definitely a strong card, and definitely affected the meta in a pretty huge way. Next up, we have Destroy decks. So Destroy decks, people just love Destroy. And I can see the reason. It's a fun archetype to play, and you get to do some unique things that other people don't. And you also get to be happy with some locations that other decks just absolutely hate. So there's definitely some huge power in playing Destroy, and you just have to be careful while removal sometimes, right? So sometimes you'll have to play Viper so you can Taskmaster, or you'll have to set up like these huge null scenarios. And if you don't be aware, like, hey, if they Alioth and I'm playing null here, like I lose, right? So you just have to be careful where they could be playing their removal and how to like mitigate that or get around that or surprise them. And then like something I've just noticed, I think Venom is like maybe the best card in this deck. Like it's not Deadpool or Killmonger or whatever. Like Venom, usually if my opponent has like a good Venom setup, those are the ones where I leave the most. So like this is something you might want to pay attention to, but like if you have Venom, you have a good setup, maybe that's when you want to be like putting pressure on your opponent, snapping, that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely a solid deck list to play. Next up, we have High Evo. High Evo, these some people are finding this like the most annoying deck to play into. Which is like I don't agree, but I can understand it in that like it's predictable in how it works, and then Cyclops, right, arguably is like super strong, or maybe too strong in some scenarios, right? It can be like a 3/12 at times, right, which is like, well, it's not, I mean it is and it's not, right, because you have to be using or wasting energy every turn, right? But I could see where they're coming from, right? So there's definitely some annoyance in it, and reducing power is just an annoying aspect of our deck build, right? If you can like remove someone's power, that feels really bad. So definitely a bad feeling deck, but very strong. Something you want to keep in mind is the early game. I would say that's sometimes more important than the late game, especially when a lot of games, you don't see the end of a game. You don't see the Hulk come down on a lot of times, right? But you get to see the Nebula, you get to see the Sunspot, you get to see the Misty Knight. And having that setup can really just say, hey, I've got my great setup, I've won, I'm going to snap, and then they leave, right? So the early game is really powerful. And just something to keep in mind is to think about Hulk, and not that you're playing Hulk, but your opponent is going to assume you're playing Hulk, right? So think about how would my opponent play if they're going to stick around, right, into a Hulk matchup, right? Like, so it looks like I'm going to play Hulk here. Is my opponent going to do that? And if he allies me, does that suck, right? Do I need to set up armor beforehand? Do I need to play Hulk in a different lane, set up where I can barely win that lane if they go ally, that kind of thing? So just think about the Hulk metagame. I would say that's pretty important if you're playing this deck list, because it can be telegraphed, right? And if it is telegraphed, well, if your opponent is like paying attention, that can be used to your advantage. So just something to keep in mind. Think about Hulk and think about your opponent. Think about Hulk when you're playing a deck like this. Next up, we have Electro Ramp. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Electro Ramp. I just like stopping people with Sandman and whatnot, and just playing big cards. Like, I'm a big card fan, right? So definitely a solid list. Sandman stops a lot of decks, and there's definitely a lot of value in Odin, with especially Doctor Doom Odin. That's like a true combo. But Black Panther, Alioth, Leader, Zola, sometimes if you're really gonna do that, you can go wave into Odin as well. Like, so there's definitely a lot of ways for Odin to be a very, very big nuisance. I would say it used to be also like a goblin target, but people are playing less goblins because Galactus is less in the meta, but it's still there. So there's definitely a lot of power in Odin if you have it in your deck. And Say Ramp is just a pretty good list if you just like making it simple for yourself, where it's like I play one card with Electro, and I play one card and one card and one card, right? Like it's not like you have to do tons of things to do well with Electro Ramp. So definitely a solid, easy list of pilot if you like that kind of thing. Next up, we have High Abomination. So this is very similar to High Evo. It is a High Evo deck, but you now rely on Abomination. You rely on reducing power instead of like, hey, I always play Hulk and lock down and win. So this one's a little bit different in that you want to be on the ball, in that you're counting your opponent, how many cards you're playing with negative ticks. How many negative ticks can you put on your opponent? Can you Cyclops in the right lane? Can you Thing in the right lane? So that you get a really cheap Abomination. That's where the strength lies, the Abomination. And it can be a very annoying deck to play into, because it feels bad to play a card and then that card is giving you negative value, right? Like you play a 2 power card, you get -2 a couple times, and then it's a 0 power, -1 power. It's like, why did I even play it, right? So it's just a powerful deck in how it uses Abomination, but that's the key strength in this deck. If your opponent isn't playing much, or your opponent doesn't have like a good target for your negative value, then this deck can kind of fall off a little bit because you're not really using what it's made to do. Next up, we have Bounce. So Bounce has resurfaced a little bit with the Elsa changes the Elsa addition, since you can really do a lot of Elsa procs in a Bounce deck. You play a lot of cheap cards and you play them again, right? So you could do a lot where you're playing tons of annoying things and just being a nuisance with Elsa. But Hitmonkey as well has also been very strong. It got nerfed and it lost play after that, but people have been making decks that have been able to flood a lot, and Hitmonkey has worked in those scenarios. So Hitmonkey's kind of had a resurgence, and also with Hitmonkey has created large value plays, so you can really just attack multiple lanes at once with this setup. So definitely pretty strong archetype to play if you like that kind of thing. If you miss Bounce, here you go. Next up, we have Hela Tribunal. Hey, it's up here, right? I just think like there's not that much. People aren't playing counter meta strategies that much, right? So people aren't really doing, hey, I'm gonna just run Enchantress Cosmo. That's my Killmonger. That's my game plan. I'm just gonna counter everything. That used to be like my preferred playstyle, but it's definitely easier to win by doing your own thing and then like maybe Alioth at the end if you want to counter their strategies, than to just build around I'm going to counter from the get-go, especially when people have Alioth now, and if you want to counter at the end, it's like I'll just Alioth you and you can't counter me. So definitely see less people countering, so things like Hela Tribunal has worked out where if you can just set up, like, you win. If you can get the setup, you win. There's no counters, so people aren't playing Cosmo that much. So it's definitely something you can do if you like that type of combo deck and you like just like having the win condition guaranteed to your head. If you can pull it off, this is a deck for you. And it's nice to have Tribunal just to have a secondary win condition with Iron Man, with Onslaught, just to say, hey, even if I don't have Modok Hela, I can win another way. So that's something I think is really important in decks, to have more than one win condition, where if you only have one win condition, 25% of the games you auto lose because you're not going to draw it. So this one gives you multiple chances to have the combos you need, and then you go, you play it out, and you win. Next up, we have Loki. So Loki definitely played a lot less since the Elsa changes. One argument could be like maybe not as necessary for an Elsa Bloodstone decklist, or Mobius just being like effective in like reducing the priority, or people just play with the new cards and they've moved on from Loki. They don't want to be that person anymore. They've had a change of heart because there's a new shinier toy to play. But I still think Loki is still powerful. You don't always need to play Loki early. I think is something important to mention, right? Something you can do is play Loki turn 6 just for collector buff. Loki turn 6, like also the Snowguard nerf also. Like, it mattered. I would say it mattered because you can't go Snowguard into a 2-drop, right? Which you used to always be able to do. Now you need to like have things to play. So I would say like that's not the biggest nerf, honestly, but it matters. Like if you're playing Snowguard, you notice it sometimes. So, but still, Loki strong, Loki good, and just less people playing it, which is fair, and I can understand it for sure. But yeah, definitely still a deck that could still perform well. Next up, we have Junk. So Junk's pretty good into flood decks, and Elsa decks are a lot of flood decks. So Junk has a lot of potential to just be annoying into those matchups where you're just giving them tons of things you don't want. And Titania usage, I would say, is maybe the most annoying or sometimes difficult part of it. Sometimes if you have like Titania Green Goblin, like that one is kind of easy because if they fill the lane, well, then, as long as they're not filling everything, which most players will not completely fill a lane early because it's not that smart, because you give them the exact power they need to win. So most players won't do that, right? But they'll fill maybe 3 spots, right? And if that happens, okay, Green Goblin goes over, you sub the Titania, that's not a problem. However, if they don't do that, then the Titania goes over, it fills for them, and as long as you play anything, then you win that lane either. So Titania usage can be super powerful, especially with Green Goblin. Just a very powerful combination to have. And Junk decks, will be on the up and up, honestly. with the next couple of seasons. So definitely see more of this. But if you like to get ahead of the meta, ahead of the competition, you want to be that person, know for the future, you can definitely play some junk. And it works out pretty well in this particular meta anyway. So it's not too much of an issue. Next up, we have Phoenix Nimrod. So this is a deck, I would say, more on the niche side, but I definitely see some people playing it, and it also seems to do well. I would say this deck's issue, right, is maybe draw order, where you are fighting yourself and that you need to make sure that you get this into that. And if you can do that, then you have a really good game plan, right? You just need Phoenix Force to trigger. If you can get Phoenix Force to trigger on your multiple man or your Human Torch or anything like that, then you can do a lot of work. But usually if that's not the case, then we have the Shuri into Nimrod into Zola kind of combination where you have something else to do to kind of win you the game. So I do like the secondary win condition. I say that's like a key feature of a good list. It has multiple ways to win. But generally, if you can get Phoenix Force to trigger in a meaningful way, you're good to go. So pretty powerful deck list when it works. Next up, we have Negative. So Negative, I would say, has been struggling because of Mobius, right? Once it came out, you kind of completely lock out any negative strategies. There's no reason to play, but there's less Mobius in the meta. Now, the problem is there is enough Mobius that I can't really say, yeah, let's go negative. There's enough Mobius that is still annoying, so I can't, but it's the deck here doesn't necessarily need negative to win, right? So negative Surfer, negative Black Panther decks, right? These decks don't necessarily need negative to win, and that's why it's playable, because even if you are in the Mobius, you're against a Mobius player, you can just change your game plan and say, okay, we're going Wong, Black Panther, Zola, or something like that. Like, that's all I need to win, which, that's weird that you could just win with those three cards. But then again, Wong is like breaks the rules, right? So kind of fair, but definitely these decks don't necessarily need to play negative to win or need to not be against a Mobius deck. And you have things like Rogue if you want to play that to kind of deal with that setup. If you really want to be more negative focused, right, you can definitely Rogue in these decks and still do fine. But yeah, definitely less Mobius, so you can play negative. But even if you can't play negative, you don't necessarily need negative to win. And that's why I would say still playable and has like decent stats. And we have Thanos. So Thanos is still okay, right? The power of the stones are still strong, and that's the key reason you play Thanos. Not because, hey, I get to play Thanos, but the stones do a lot for you. Like, you get to draw, you get to reduce power, you get to add an energy. Like, Time Stone is still, I think, one of the best, like, individual cards to have in your deck. But obviously, you have to deal with the rest of the nerfs and things like that over time, right? So the stones aren't as crazy as they used to be, but you can still do a lot of cool things with Thanos, right? Thanos is one of the best Professor X usage archetypes, and then you can just like do things like Khazar, things like Claw, things like whatever you want, really. Blue Marvel, Dino, Devil Sword is also a really good card in this deck. So there's a lot of cool things with the stones, and Thanos still really good if you like Thanos deck list. Next up, we have Shenaut. So Shenaut, I would say, was a little bit weaker before because of the one card that does that one thing. Legion. There we go. Because the Legion would just knock out magic, right? So if you played magic, the Legion, you can't do magic. But Legion got nerfed. Legion is definitely less played for sure. So you can definitely go back to the I play magic and set up for turn 7, and hopefully you don't have an answer to that. And then we can just blam, play tons of power in the final turns. So you have to be a little bit careful with Alioth if they're planning for it, right? You usually are going to be behind, so you want to make sure your play isn't super duper obvious, but definitely has the potential to just be a big knockout. And a lot of times you're playing leech, so if they have Alioth, you leech them and then they can't do whatever they want to do. So pretty good now, pretty solid, has some good setups, and you can definitely play it if you like it. Thumbs up from me. And then we have, I believe this is the last one we have Galactus. So Galactus is still in the meta, but it's definitely not like the most popular archetype, which was before. So, you know, say what you will about the nerf strategy or the nerf adjustments, right? They definitely accomplished their goal. I still see some Galactus, but it's nowhere near the level of Galactus play that it was before. And it's something I just want to talk about, right? Sometimes not playing Galactus is the best way to actually play Galactus. You set up for Galactus, but then you don't actually play it, so that your opponent, you know, plays into that matchup but doesn't actually get the payoff of like, I'm gonna full invest into that Galactus thing. You're just like, I don't care, like Orc over here, like I still win. You know, so, and then just be unexpected. I think that's something that's just something you want to be doing if you're a Galactus player. Just don't always be telegraphed. Like sometimes, right, you just play a wave, right, and you know, it's like, okay, sure, right, and it's just like, it depends on how you're doing things. But yeah, being unexpected is definitely the best approach to getting these games to go in your favor if you are playing Galactus in essence. So good luck out there, I would say. I haven't been saying that for Galactus players, but I'll say it here. And that's definitely my overall list of the meta. There's definitely some more niche stuff, but I usually want to cover like an overarching, like you'll see these decks kind of thing. And I think you'll see most of these like overall in the meta, and we'll see. There's definitely some new cards coming out. Man Thing is coming out in a couple of days, and we'll see how that shakes up the meta. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts. What do you think about this list? Made a couple of changes and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I got. Hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one.
Educatedcollins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow snap. Your skills will be